I will be talking to you today about social stratification. I know that some of you are sociology majors, but others of you are not, and some of these concepts may be completely new to you, so it's important to lay the foundation for this next unit of the class in which we talk about social determinants of health and illness. The first term that I want to define for you is social stratification. Social stratification can be defined as a system by which society ranks categories of people in a hierarchy. So you can think about something very simple like intelligence. Someone who is smarter is considered to be higher in the social hierarchy than someone who is not as smart. The same goes for attractiveness. Someone who's more attractive is considered to be higher in the hierarchy than someone who's less attractive. There are four fundamental principles of social stratification. The first is that it is a characteristic of society. It is not just due to individual differences. If you look around you, you can see that there are lots of natural human variations in appearance, in abilities, in emotions, and which ones we choose to incorporate into our system of stratification, it has no inherent meaning, right? Those are socially constructed. We choose what individual differences will be the basis of social stratification. That makes it a characteristic of society, right? It's not just about individuals and how individuals differ. For example, we don't really use hair color as a meaningful trait for social stratification in our society, but we could. Okay, the second fundamental principle of stratification is that social stratification persists over generations. What this means is that if your parents are of high status, for example, they have a lot of money and power, then you are more likely to be of high status as well. This is why we see things like wealth accumulating in families and persisting over time. Now, that being said, most societies do allow some kind of social mobility or changes in people's position in a system of social stratification. So you might hear about someone being upwardly mobile, which means that they didn't come from a lot of money, maybe, or they didn't come from a highly educated family, but they are themselves fairly educated, they make a good living, and the reverse is also true. You can also have downward mobility, where you come from wealth or prestige, and then you take a tumble in the status hierarchy of society. The third fundamental principle is that social stratification is universal but variable. What that means is that all societies have some system of social stratification. There is no utopian society where everyone is completely equal. We always put people on a hierarchy that is based on something. Now, that is what's variable. Basis of social stratification varies across cultures, and it also changes over time. But social stratification as a system is a universal property of societies. The third fundamental principle of stratification is that it involves both inequality and beliefs. What this means is that, yes, there are real inequalities. For example, I could say that African Americans tend to have less wealth than whites. Although that may be an objective reality, at least in American society, there are also a lot of subjective beliefs that go into social stratification, and we can think about these as stereotypes, ways that we think about certain groups which may or may not be true, and it usually involves generalization to all people in a group when in reality that characteristic may not be true of even a majority of people. Social stratification is based both on some real inequalities and also our beliefs about inequalities between groups. Another way to think about social stratification is that it is a patterned type of social inequality. So it's the unequal distribution of societal resources. So saying that inequality is patterned indicates that the differences occur on a wide-scale basis. So you might be able to pluck one individual that you know out of all the people you know and another individual and compare them and say, wait a minute, this doesn't fit such and such a social inequality. However, in general, on the whole, there are wide-scale differences between groups. These differences also tend to occur with regularity, so most of the time. And social inequalities are patterned along lines of specific identifiable characteristics. Usually we think of social inequalities as occurring according to race, class, and gender. So if we think about something like gender inequality in the workplace, it is wide scale. So we know that women tend to enter certain kinds of occupations and men tend to enter other kinds of occupations. And those occupations that women tend to hold are lower prestige than those that men tend to hold. Even within the same profession, men rise through the ranks of a profession faster and higher than women do in general. And then in addition, even when women hold the same position within the same job, there tends to be a gap in pay. This occurs on a wide scale basis, right? So if we take the average of men and women, we see differences in occupational prestige and in pay in the workplace. And it occurs with regularity, right? It occurs most of the time. And it is along lines of certain specific identifiable characteristics, namely gender. So you might know a woman who's a CEO who does really well, and she might be the richest and most powerful person in your social network. And then you might know a guy who doesn't have a job, lives in a ditch, fine, but that doesn't mean that in general women aren't at a disadvantage in the workplace. Another way to think about social inequality being patterned is that if we know whether a person or a group possesses certain traits, then we will be able to predict with reasonable accuracy how this person or group is likely to fare in the social hierarchy. So for example, if we know that someone is male, white, well-educated, has a prestigious occupation, and has a considerable amount of wealth, then we can predict a lot about how others will view this person and how they are going to rank in the social hierarchy compared to, say, someone who is racial or ethnic minority, uneducated, and who has little to no wealth. So we can predict on the basis of certain traits without knowing anything about that person's personality or what they look like, etc., what their social status is going to be in society. Some types of people systematically experience advantages in society, while other types of people are systematically disadvantaged in our society. That's another way to think about this. So you can think about it as the haves and the have-nots. This is really important. The determination of who is socially advantaged and who is included among the ranks of the socially disadvantaged is based in part on certain characteristics that those individuals possess, and in part on how our society values or devalues those characteristics. If we think about something like attractiveness, our society does not value a large body, at least at this point in time and in our culture. So if someone has certain characteristics, they may or may not be valued or devalued in society. Those characteristics may make them more or less attractive. It just totally depends. If you think about something like having a big butt, that is valued in some cultures, even in America, whereas it's not valued in other societies. So the point of that is that we have to bring together the characteristics that people actually have and then how societies actually think about those characteristics. And the second part is what is socially constructed, right? That is the social stratification part, is where we put those characteristics in our hierarchical ranking of what is valued and not valued in society. The system of stratification and any particular person's place in that system of stratification is usually based on three factors. And this comes from Max Weber, who is one of the most famous social theorists. And he said that stratification is a function of property, or what you own, the kinds of wealth that you have. And you can think about all the things that purchasing power buys you in America, for example. It can buy you health. It can buy you time. Wealth can buy you fancy clothes that make other people think highly of you. Okay, another factor in stratification is prestige. So that is the respect that's given to you by others, or how others think about you. So if others think that you are really smart, or if others think that you're really beautiful, if others feel like you're a great leader and you have good ideas, all of these things are going to elevate your status in society, and you will be ranked higher on the stratification hierarchy. Another factor, the third factor in social stratification, is power. And power is the ability to impose your will on someone else. It is the power to do what you want and to get what you want. And people with more power in society tend to be ranked higher on the stratification hierarchy. Usually we think about power in terms of political power, but there are other kinds of power as well. So if you think about power, prestige, and property or wealth, those three things tend to go together, right? There are some cases where someone might have a lot of power, but they don't have prestige, right? So you can think of a case where maybe you have a dictator and they have a lot of power, but no one really thinks very highly of them. It's also possible to be very wealthy and for people to not think very highly of you. So you could think of someone like Paris Hilton or other celebrities who have a ton of money, but who generally people think aren't that smart or don't make good decisions. But in general, these three tend to cluster together. And this occurs for a lot of reasons. So if you have a lot of wealth and power, then at least in America, we want to believe that you deserve that. So if you are very rich and powerful, then we want to believe that you deserve that respect. So we tend to give it. By the same token, if you're very powerful, then you can secure more wealth. And wealth also helps you get power, right? You can literally buy political power in our political system through lobbying groups and other means. So for a lot of reasons, these three tend to cluster together. Now, social stratification can be based on both ascribed or achieved characteristics. Ascribed characteristics are those that are inherited. You are born with them and you don't have any control over them. So these are inherited social positions assigned to individuals or groups that are based on traits that are beyond their control. So something like the sex that you're born with, your race, many of your physical characteristics, something like your parents' socioeconomic status. So these are things that you're born into. Social stratification may also be based on achieved statuses. These are positions that a person acquires on the basis of merit, effort, or choice. So these are things that you accomplish or that you choose in your life, and each person has some sort of agency in achieved statuses. So these are things like your marital status. You can choose whether or not to get married, where you live, and your personal SES, your personal socioeconomic status, or how wealthy you are. Now, of course, your achieved statuses depend in part on your ascribed statuses. Nonetheless, we can distinguish between things you have absolutely no control over and those which you probably have at least some control over. Now, many positions are actually a mixture of achievement and description. So, for example, a person who has the achieved status of being a doctor is more likely to have the ascribed status of being born into a wealthy family, for example. You're probably wondering, why are we talking so much about social stratification in a class on health and illness? This is because social stratification has a profound effect on people's lives, and it manifests in various ways in society. Because of patterned inequality, social stratification affects people's life chances. Now, life chances are opportunities that individuals do or do not have to engage in certain activities, It is the opportunities that people have or don't have to accomplish certain goals in life. And these are based on where they are located in the social hierarchy. So, for example, very intelligent children may be born into a very poor family. That same exact child born into a wealthy family is going to have much better life chances and will probably have much stronger achievement than one who is born into a poor family. And this is due simply to the opportunities that are afforded to children growing up in wealthy versus poor families. And this applies to health as well. And we will be talking about that for the next couple of months. People that are in certain places in the stratification hierarchy have fewer opportunities or greater opportunities to achieve health than others. Social inequality and social stratification has a profound effect on people's health. And this is what we will be talking about for quite a while. Thanks for tuning in.